Israel is a country that lives its everyday life amidst constant conflicts, wars, and political tensions. The country's history is rooted in the struggle of religious, ethnic, and national identities, and even today, the fundamental issues that have been influencing Israeli society for decades remain at the forefront. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the associated territorial disputes shape not only political decisions but also everyday life. In the mid-20th century, following its establishment, Israel immediately became involved in a cycle of war that would define the region's stability and security situation for multiple generations. Israel is surrounded by several hostile states, and its defense strategies continue to play a central role in determining the country's future. Terrorist organizations like Hamas and ISIS pose new challenges year after year, and threats beyond the borders become increasingly relevant. Over the decades, Israelis have learned how to live under the shadow of war while striving to build a normal, everyday life. The majority of Israel's population, both Jewish and Arab, holds divided views on how the conflict should be managed and what state security truly means. For many Israelis, military service is not just an obligation but a way of life, as defending the state is a central aspect of Israeli identity. For the Arab community, the state's political and social policies often appear more like oppression, which shapes how they experience everyday life in Israel from a different perspective. Since the 1948 War of Independence, Israel has found itself at war multiple times, but the most significant impacts came from the 1973 Yom Kippur War and the 1982 Lebanon War. The Second Intifada that began in the 2000s, a Palestinian uprising, reminded the world once again that the rift between the two peoples is still alive, and many people continue to live in a war-torn environment. Hamas, as a radical Palestinian organization, increasingly launched military attacks against Israel, further escalating the already tense relations. The attack on October 7, 2023, will be remembered as an especially dramatic moment, when thousands of rockets and hundreds of terrorists targeted various areas in Israel, completely disrupting daily life. The surprise attacks from the Gaza Strip hit Israel with sudden and unexpected force, leaving the population not only dealing with the military but also constantly facing a sense of threat. The rockets reached Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and other significant cities, raising serious national security concerns. Local authorities responded quickly, but their sense of calm was short-lived, as the conflict resurfaced time and again, making its presence felt in everyday life. The current wartime situation once again highlights that Israeli society is constantly adapting and seeking safety. The conflict requires not only military resources but also demands significant social and economic sacrifices. Every day brings a new question, a new risk, as the country, while striving to build a modern economy and dynamic society, cannot escape the ever-present shadow of war. Therefore, Israeli people live in an environment where their everyday life is defined by the looming threat of conflict, as they work to maintain their security. 1. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the beginning of the latest war. The roots of the conflict between Israel and Palestine go deep into history, shaped by numerous wars, military clashes, and political and religious disagreements that influenced the creation of the Israeli state. The 1948 Israeli War of Independence, which led to the establishment of Israel on Palestinian territory, was only the first step in a decades-long series of struggles that continuously heightened tensions between the two peoples. The 1967 war, during which Israel seized the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, further deepened the political divide. The latest war, which erupted on October 7, 2023, began with an attack by the terrorist organization Hamas. Hamas fired rockets at Israel and carried out several terror attacks, crossing into Israeli territory from the Gaza Strip. This surprise attack, coupled with ongoing Islamist actions, once again reinforced the fear that Israel may never be able to achieve lasting peace with the Palestinians. After the war broke out, Israel launched rapid counterattacks against Hamas and other Palestinian forces, but the situation quickly escalated. The war intensified the already existing social and political tensions between Israeli and Palestinian communities, while the international community, particularly neighboring Arab nations, closely watched the events unfold. As a result of the Hamas attacks, hundreds of victims were reported from both sides of the conflict. Israel's response not only had serious military consequences but also triggered further diplomatic and economic crises. The attacks on Israel led its population to face the harsh reality that peaceful coexistence in the region is not only a political challenge but a security one as well. The country has already deployed significant military resources to ensure its security, but amid the ongoing threats, the geopolitical reality must also be considered. This war may signal future complications, while it remains uncertain when the continuous, destructive cycle of violence will end. 2. The impact on daily life. The effects of the latest war on daily life in Israel quickly became noticeable and dramatic. The Israeli population, already accustomed to the constant threat of war, once again had to face ongoing rocket attacks and air raid sirens. As a result of Hamas's attacks, Israeli cities, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, were bombarded, with significant damage to civilian infrastructure, especially in the southern and central regions. Air raid sirens and security alerts became everyday occurrences, with people having to choose the safest routes to avoid bomb damage each morning. Schools were closed, and families sought refuge in safer locations. The healthcare system was under immense pressure, as not only war casualties but also elderly and sick individuals required daily medical attention due to the circumstances. The psychological toll of the war was also evident. Many Israeli families experienced personal tragedies, while anxiety and fear became constant companions in their lives. Community life, particularly along the borders, faced serious challenges, with defensive measures taken in response to the rocket attacks testing the strength and resilience of the population. Businesses, restaurants, and other public spaces were closed, and the economy felt the effects of the war. Many businesses struggled with closures, reduced demand, and economic restrictions. People worried about food, water, and medical supplies, as humanitarian assistance and the transportation of goods were hindered by ongoing disruptions. The war posed serious challenges to Israeli society, forcing a re-evaluation of daily routines and access to basic needs, all while trying to maintain security. People were compelled to adapt quickly to wartime conditions, as they faced not only immediate threats but also long-term consequences of the ongoing conflict. 3. The Israeli military situation and political reactions. The war represents the greatest military challenge for Israel, as attacks from terrorist groups directly threaten the country's security. The Israeli military, internationally recognized for its modern technological and tactical capabilities, responded quickly to the Hamas attack. The Air Force and ground troops launched targeted operations to destroy Hamas weapon caches, command centers, and to prevent further attacks. However, despite the effectiveness of the military response, many innocent lives were lost, as Hamas forces often hide in civilian areas. The escalating tensions of the war are also significantly affecting the Israeli political landscape. The government, whose primary responsibility is the defense of the nation, is forced to make rapid decisions regarding military actions while also grappling with internal political criticisms and opposition voices. Many Israeli citizens and political leaders question the long-term goals of the war, while the international community keeps a close eye on Israel's actions regarding the occupation of Palestinian territories and the use of military force. The mobilization of the army and the fulfillment of compulsory military service have an extraordinary impact on daily life in Israel. Due to the army's central role, military service is almost a mandatory path for young Israelis, and the number of volunteers has surged as the war directly threatens the country. The ongoing threats and the corresponding military response have shaped Israeli society's approach to defense and its policy of self-defense. For policymakers, it is vital to maintain stability and prevent internal divisions. The war situation has created even greater political tension, and the management of the military situation affects not only Israel's internal cohesion but also its international political and diplomatic relations. The country is doing everything possible to achieve its political goals without incurring more casualties, but the final outcome of the war remains uncertain. 4. The international community and humanitarian situation. The war has profoundly affected not just Israel, but also the Palestinian territories. Israeli military operations have targeted not only military objectives but have also directly endangered the lives of civilians. The Gaza Strip is experiencing a severe humanitarian crisis, where ensuring basic supplies such as food, medical care, and clean water has become an incredibly difficult task. The international community, through various aid organizations and UN specialized agencies, is trying to provide assistance. For example, Amnesty International has labeled Israel's Gaza military offensive as genocide, while humanitarian organizations continue to warn of aid blockages and the worsening of the situation. 5. The reactions of the international community and diplomatic challenges. The war between Israel and Palestinian groups has always attracted international attention, and the latest conflict has been no exception. Many global reactions expressed strong concerns regarding the humanitarian consequences of the war, particularly the issues of civilian casualties and refugees. The United States, as Israel's largest ally, firmly supported the Jewish state's right to defense, while other nations, such as the European Union, adopted a more cautious stance, calling for a reduction in violence. The United Nations, UN, and other international institutions attempted to mediate to ease the situation, but a lasting ceasefire was not achieved. The UN and various human rights organizations sharply criticized the military tactics used during the war and voiced concerns over the suffering of civilians. Due to Hamas and other Palestinian factions' targeted attacks, Israel increased its security measures, resulting in diplomatic tensions, particularly with Arab countries. Regional powers, including Egypt and Jordan, are trying to moderate the intensity of the conflict, but negotiations progress slowly due to the deep-rooted differences between the Palestinian and Israeli sides. Other Arab countries, such as Qatar and Turkey, have emphasized Palestinian rights and have continuously tried to guide Israeli policies through diplomatic means. The geopolitical situation and international support have clearly influenced the steps Israel takes during the war and how its decisions are shaped by foreign relations. Thanks to diplomatic dialogues and international pressure, both sides have considered the viewpoints of each other, but a real solution is expected to form only in the near future. Instead of achieving a peaceful settlement, the central issue between the two states will likely remain a matter of growing diplomatic challenges year by year for the world's leaders. 6. The response of Israeli society and internal divisions. In Israel, the war not only affects foreign policy but deeply divides the society as well. While most of the country's population is ready to engage in the defense effort, the long-term effects of the war, the casualties, and the constant threats raise new questions about the future of society. Many young Israelis who are involved in military service are directly experiencing the severe psychological effects of the war, and for some, even preserving family bonds has become a struggle. During the first months of the war, civil protests and demonstrations became frequent, driven by various political and religious ideologies. Israel's internal political situation has also generated tension regarding the war. Political parties representing different ideological views, such as left-wing, liberal, and religious factions, often stand at opposite ends regarding the righteousness of military actions and their long-term goals. Liberals and leftists advocate for a swift end to the war, while conservatives and religious Jewish communities emphasize the Israeli state's right to self-defense. Furthermore, many Arab Israeli communities living alongside the Jewish state do not share the general consensus supporting the war. The social divide is also reinforced by inequality, as Arabs and other minorities often feel marginalized from the national discourse. The use of military force and political debates about territorial issues impact each community in different ways. Additionally, the war strengthens communal solidarity among families sending soldiers to the front, while others worry for the safety of their own family members. The economic situation has also generated internal tensions, as the war has caused additional damage to businesses and increased economic inequalities. The role of women and youth in the war environment has become particularly important, and many people are attempting to adapt to new roles and norms as the war continues. Summary: Israel is a country where daily life is shaped by war and political uncertainty. For its residents, the challenges are not only military operations and losses but also the need to adapt and live through the ongoing tension-filled days. Living under the shadow of war in this country is not only about physical security but also about a life philosophy that demands constant adaptation. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on future content. Also, be sure to check out my other videos. There's a lot of exciting things waiting for you.